Welcome to today's webinar, OSHA Recordkeeping Review and Update. A little bit about myself. My name is Drew Page. I will be presenting today's webinar. I work with Optimum Safety Management and I am the FCA liaison to the Safety Advisory Committee. Just a little bit about my background, about 10 years experience in safety and health management. Construction high-rise companies, general contractors, subcontractors, also manufacturing. So this record-keeping standard applies to pretty much everybody in construction and manufacturing. So this will be very pertinent to everyone on today's call. As we go through this, we are going to have everybody on mute, or else it gets kind of hectic. And so if you do have any questions as we're going through the webinar, please note that there is a FCA safety helpline free to all members for you guys to submit a question via email, which I strongly recommend. If you have any questions that are not answered during this webinar or you need some more assistance, feel free to contact the safety helpline at the email that you see on the screen, or you could actually call the hotline number as well. That'll be listed on the bottom of every screen, so you have plenty of time to write that down. But any questions can be sent there. Also, at the end of this, if you request the presentation through the helpline email, I will happily send you the presentation as well, so you have all this information you can share with people in your organizations. So the outline for today, we're going to look at record-keeping requirements as an overview. There is a lot to record keeping, but we're going to look at it as a high-level overview. Overview also of maintaining and posting records. We're going to talk about the new electronic submission of records. This is a new rule, so I want to make sure that everybody is up to speed with this new rule. Severe injury reporting. They revised this in 2015, so I want to review that, make sure that we understand the rules there, and employee involvement and anti-retaliation protections. These have recently been updated and added to with the new electronic submission of records. So we're going to review all that today and make sure you guys are on board with what needs to be done. So let's roll right into an overview of the record-keeping requirements. So all employers with 10 employees or more must keep fatality, injury, and illness records. So if you don't have more than 10 employees in your company, you don't have to keep these records. I'm going to guess that most of you on this line definitely have 10 employees or more. And we're talking about 10 employees throughout the calendar year, okay? Also, there is a partial exemption to some industries on the NAICS, so North American Industry Classification System. None of these exemptions have to do with construction or manufacturing. So everyone on the line today falls under a construction, so your NAICS number will start with 23, and sorry, you are not partially exempt. So more than 10 employees must keep these record-keeping records, okay? All right, so what do we need to keep? We need to keep these records for up to 5 years, all right? Accurate records of every injury that is work-related, it's a new case, and it results into any of the following. So fatality, absolutely. Days away from work, restricted work or transfer, additionally, any injury that an employee receives loss of consciousness, we must have those recorded, and any medical treatment beyond first aid. So we're going to take some time today and talk about what is medical treatment beyond first aid. Before we get into that, I just want to clarify, you know, we need to keep these records for 5 years, okay? So there was another final rule that just got rolled back. It was passed through the House and the Senate, and it was rolled back. and commonly referred to as the Volk's Rule. And what this did was it looked back and it said, hey, if you're not properly maintaining your records for the last 5 years, and OSHA has evidence of this, that they could cite you. So this was rolled back saying, no, the statute of limitations is 6 months, so it still is 6 months. So we're required to keep these records for 5 years. However, if they're out of date and OSHA finds out of it and it's outside of that 6 month window, they can't actually cite us. So that rule has been rolled back. Everything else we're talking about today, though, is still in play. So I know there's a little bit of confusion on, hey, the record keeping rule went away. No, it was just that they can't cite you if they find out that your records are not good outside of 6 months, right? So we still need to keep them for 5 years. They can still request them. Let me see your records for 5 years, and if you don't produce them, then they can cite you. But if you produce them and they find out that there's errors on them and they're outside of 6 months, they cannot cite you. So I just wanted to clarify that before we move forward. So what is medical treatment beyond first aid? Very important. OSHA defines this. They have a specific list, so we're going to go through that. So using non-prescription medication at non-prescription strength is defined as first aid. So if someone goes to the clinic and the doctor says, hey, take ibuprofen at over-the-counter strength, then only first aid. Does not need to be recorded on your log. If that doctor says, hey, I want you to take ibuprofen at a strength that's over what is recommended on the bottle, so now they're giving a prescription of that over-the-counter, then yes, that's now going to be an OSHA recordable injury, and you have to record it on your OSHA logs. Any prescription, any script that you get from the pharmacy, absolutely has to go on your OSHA logs. Tetanus shot. A tetanus shot is defined as first aid. Now, other immunizations such as hepatitis B, rabies, that sort of thing, that is all considered medical treatment. Tetanus is unique. They look at it as preventative. So if somebody, let's say, steps on a rusty nail, they're not sure when the last time they got their tetanus shot, they go to the clinic, they wash the wound, no big deal, and give them a tetanus shot for preventative measures. That's all first aid. Does not need to go on your OSHA log. Cleaning or flushing or soaking wounds on the surface of the skin would be considered first aid. Wound coverings such as Band-Aids, gauze, pads are considered first aid. Butterfly bandages or steri strips used as a covering would be considered first aid. When we start using those type of things for closing a wound is when we're now into medical treatment and it needs to go on our OSHA log. So sometimes they close a wound with glue. Sometimes they close them with sutures, staples. All of that is medical treatment, and we're closing a wound, so now it needs to go on our OSHA log. Anytime we cover something, if it doesn't need to be closed and we just need to cover it, that is just first aid. Hot or cold therapy, first aid. Using a non-rigid means of support, so wraps, bandages, that sort of thing, that is first aid. Now, once we get into this rigid support, no longer first aid. The doctor gave rigid support for somebody to wear, that's now medical treatment. Temporary immobilization devices, so such as a backboard. We need to transport this person to the hospital to get further x-rays, whatever, to make sure that they don't have any fractures in their spine. That's all preventative. If they received the x-ray and there was no fractures and no other medical treatment, just because someone was backboarded does not mean it goes on your OSHA recordable logs. Drilling of a fingernail or toenail to relieve pressure. This would, again, be first aid. Eye patches, first aid. Removing foreign bodies from the eye. Using irrigation or a cotton swab. That would be first aid measures, even if it's done at the clinic, okay? Just because we went to the clinic doesn't mean it's OSHA recordable. First aid could be administered at the clinic. removing splinters or foreign materials from areas other than the eye, irrigation, tweezers, cotton swabs, or other simple means is all first aid. So other than the eye. So what this means is if the doctor has to use tweezers to remove a foreign body from the eye, that's more than irrigation and cotton swab. At that point, it's a medical procedure and it needs to go on your OSHA logs. So again, this is a very defined list from OSHA. Using finger guards, this would be first aid. Massages are first aid, and drinking fluids for relief of heat stress would additionally be a first aid measure. So that's your list of what OSHA considers first aid. Anything outside of that now is going to be medical treatment, at which point it needs to be recorded on your OSHA logs. Other items that would need to be recorded on the OSHA log, and there's some nuances with this, and these are kind of the rare cases. And if you run into any of these issues, again, you can contact the FCA safety helpline. But any work-related diagnosis of cancer, chronic diseases, definitely anytime someone fractures a bone or a tooth, that needs to go on the OSHA log as well. Punctured eardrums, okay? Also, there's some special requirements for cases involving needle sticks, sharp injuries, medical removal, hearing loss, and TB. So just to be familiar. OSHA also does have this nice flow chart where if you're not sure, do I need to record this injury or not? Here you go. It's a nice little flow chart, yes or no. So that might be something that if you're not sure, might be good to have handy at your desk or posted somewhere. So there's a lot more to what needs to be recorded. Just wanted to really give you an overview of that. If you have more questions, let's be talking about that. Now, maintaining and posting these records, let's look at an overview of this as well. So 3 different forms out there. Most likely you've heard of all of them. The OSHA 300 log. This is where you're going to actually log every individual recordable injury. OSHA 300A, that is the end of year summary of all those injuries on the 300 log. And the OSHA 301, that's the actual incident and illness per injury, the report of what happened. Okay, you can download all these forms on OSHA's website. You can see the link to that right there, and you can get all these forms. Okay, so OSHA says within 7 calendar days of receiving information that a recordable injury or illness has occurred, you need to complete the OSHA 301, the incident report. So who was the injured party? What happened? What body part? It's going to go through a bunch of questions for you. Their home address, that sort of thing. Very baseline. That's the minimum, okay? So that's the minimum report that must be filled out, or equivalent. So maybe you have a report that needs to go to your insurance company and it has all that information plus some more, then all you would need to do is fill that report out and keep it on file, and that would be your equivalent to 301. Or maybe you have an internal form that has all the information that the 301's looking for and all the information that your insurance company's looking for, and maybe it has some more, all right? So needs to have bare minimum the OSHA 301 requirements. Additionally, you must log that on the OSHA 300 log. So where you list the person's name, their title, the injury, and what kind of injury it was. Fatality, lost time, days away from work, job transfer, or an other than an other recordable. So maybe there was some medical treatment, they came back to work, no restricted duty, no lost time, that would be an other recordable. Additionally, at the conclusion of each year, you need to review that 300 log for accuracy. So you don't just put something on there and it's locked in and it never changes. An injury might go from an other recordable to maybe the circumstances are getting worse and that person is now on job restriction, to maybe that person needs surgery and now they're a lost time, right? So that OSHA log needs to be updated. And then we need to start putting how many days of lost time they had in there. So at the end of the year, we're going to want to review that OSHA 300 log to make sure it's accurate. So we might find someone in there that, oh, this says other recordable, but this was actually a lost time later on. So we're going to actually have to move the information to show that it was a lost time and put the amount of days. Also, we're going to want to make sure that each item on the 300 log has the corresponding incident form, so the 301 are equivalent. All right, so it's very important to do this. If you ever have an OSHA inspection, they're going to ask for the last 5 years of your OSHA logs. So the 300, the corresponding 301s, and the summaries. And if you don't have this information, it's not going to be good, right? They could actually cite you for not having the information. Now, if the information's wrong past 6 months, that again, they can't, as that past the statute of limitation, and they can't cite you. But you're going to want to make sure that these OSHA logs are up to date, and they will ask for these, and they will look at them and ask you questions if you're ever involved in an OSHA investigation. At the end of the year, we want to create that summary report, so the 300A. So that doesn't have any names on it, doesn't have any circumstances on it. It's just a total. How many total injuries did we have? How many total lost time injuries? How many total hours? All right. So we're going to need to fill that out, and we're going to have to post that from February 1 through April 30th so that your employees can see that and they have access to that. Okay. So if that's still posted, you know, within the OSHA regulations, you can take that down now. I know some companies, they just keep it up all year because they want all the employees to know what the injury rates were from the year prior. So there's a lot more to this. If you're on this call and you're responsible for keeping these records and you're still unclear, or maybe this overview sparks some questions that you're not sure of, there's some really good training actually on OSHA's website through their record keeping page, where they'll go through a tutorial and they'll go through all the nuances and a lot of different examples. So I would recommend that you do that if you have more questions. They're going to tell you how to accurately fill out the forms, how to properly count days. What do I do with temporary workers if that's maybe you're pulling guys from the hall for a couple days and then they weren't, you know, they were only here for a week, but they were on your watch and were injured. Yep, they're going to go on your OSHA log, so it'll talk about that. What if I have multiple locations? So there's a lot of different scenarios there, and it gets down into the weeds a little bit more. So just wanted a higher level overview on that for today's webinar. So electronic submission of records. Now this is new. This just came out, and so let's review this. This new rule is under 1904.41, and it was effective January 1st of this year. All right, and there's reporting requirements that are phased in over 2 years. So the first date hasn't hit yet. So if you see that January 1st and that makes you a little anxious, don't worry about it. That the first reporting date hasn't hit yet. We'll look at that, who needs to and by when. So first of all, why is OSHA doing this in the first place? Why are they requiring me to electronically submit my OSHA logs? All right, well, OSHA stance is that they're not asking you to do much more because you're already required to keep this data. All right, so they're not asking you to bend over backwards here. You're already keeping this data. And if you weren't, well, that's a different issue. Additionally, what they intend to do is post this data on a publicly accessible website. So just like if your company has undergone an OSHA inspection since 1971, I could go online and search your company's name and put a date range, again, all the way back to 1971, and look at your OSHA history. All right, you had 8 OSHA inspections, they all closed without any citation. Or you had one OSHA inspection and there were 8 citations, and I can go and look at what was each citation. So who's going to be looking at that information? Definitely the companies that you're bidding work for are most likely looking at that information. Potentially employees that want to go work for you. So OSHA intends to do the same with this data. All right, this company had so many injuries and so many work hours. All right, they don't intend to put out the names of individuals who are injured. They can't do that, but they do intend to show, all right, this company had so many injuries and so many work hours. And publicly accessible. So again, who's going to be looking at that? Absolutely, companies that you're going to be working for, and most likely employees that are going to come work for your company, they're going to want to look at that as well. All right. So again, they're not going to post any information that can identify an employee. They'll scrub all that information out, but that's their intention with this, right? And they believe that this will nudge employers to focus more on safety. So if you weren't focused before, and now you know you need to report this, and it's going to be electronically available to anybody, it might nudge you to get a little bit more serious about your safety program. That's what OSHA believes. Okay, so who needs to electronically submit these records? All right, establishments with 20 to 249 employees and in certain high-risk industries need to submit records. So these certain high-risk industries, there's a list, and absolutely anybody in construction, again, your NAICS code is going to start with 23, and you're in this high industry. So pretty much everybody on this call, 20 to 249 employees, you're going to be reporting records. Additionally, any establishment with 250 or more employees, and you're required to keep records, meaning you're not off that exempt list, which again, construction, you're not going to be off that exempt list. So there's 2 groups here, the 20 to 249 and the 250 plus. And there's 2 different reporting requirements, and you will see that on your screen right now. So this year in 2017, by July 1st, we are supposed to submit for both groupings the 300A, so the summary from 2016. Okay. In 2018, by July 1st again, if we have 250 or more employees, they want all the records. So the 300A, the 300 log, and the 301. Okay, so they want a lot of details there. 20 to 249 employees, again, all they're looking for is the summary log, the 200A. 2019 and on, they moved the submission date back to March 2nd, and they're looking for that information for the prior year, every year following. Okay? So again, this year, by July 1st, so we have a couple months, anyone with 20 or more employees needs to submit their OSHA 300A, so the summary log. So if you don't currently have that done, couple problems with that. That was supposed to be posted from February 1 to April 30, and so you didn't have that posted, so that's not good. But if you don't have that done, you really need to make sure that that's in line and accurate, because it will need to be submitted by July 1st of 2017. Okay? You're probably thinking, how the heck am I supposed to submit this? And we'll talk about that in a little bit. This is just their high-risk industry list. You can see construction is definitely going to be on there. So how do I submit these? So OSHA is providing a secure website that offers 3 options, right? You can manually enter it into a form, upload a CSV file, or if you have a record-keeping system that has this application programming interface, it'll tie into their website. Okay, well, what is the website? The website was originally scheduled to go live February of this year. Currently, to date, I literally just checked right before we got on this webinar. There is no website still. They are saying that once it is up and available, they will announce it on their homepage. All right, so hopefully they have that up and available before July 1st, or they're going to have to make some changes to their deadline dates for submitting records. Additionally, they have safeguards in place, again, to scrub names if you accidentally did submit this information, because they're asking you to submit it without the employees' names, addresses, healthcare facilities, that sort of thing. But if you do submit it with that information on there, they have a system in place to scrub that, and that won't be publicly available information. Additionally, we're talking about all employees here, so OSHA doesn't care if they're part-time, seasonal, temporary. An employee's an employee. We don't say, hey, part-time employee, do I count them as half a person? No, a person's a person. They're all full person. All right, severe injury reporting. So we just talked about record keeping overview. We talked about reporting a new electronic reporting requirement of our OSHA logs, right? So the record keeping standard is record keeping and reporting. So this is the reporting end of it for severe injuries, okay? And this is another review because this is actually was updated and was effective January 1st of 15. So hopefully this isn't the first time you're hearing this. And this applies to all employers. There are no exceptions. All right, so just because if you only have 5 employees and you don't have to keep OSHA logs, doesn't mean you're exempt from this. So this includes everybody. Severe injuries is what we're talking about here. Okay, so there are requirements for reporting work-related fatalities. One person dies at work, OSHA wants to know about it. Inpatient hospitalizations, amputations, loss of an eye, and those are the 4 right there. And we're going to go through each one in detail. Okay, so let's look at fatalities. So these must be reported to OSHA within 8 hours after learning about a work-related fatality. Okay, and only if this fatality occurs within 30 days of the work-related incident. So if somebody is injured and they go to the hospital and they're inpatient for 60 days and then they pass away on day 60, you actually don't need to report that fatality. However, you would have already reported it as an inpatient hospitalization to OSHA. But within 8 hours, we need to report any fatalities work-related. Okay. Heart attacks are a bit of a question, and OSHA actually addresses them specifically. And I personally had to deal with this where a gentleman actually suffered a heart attack on the job site and passed away. And yes, those do need to be reported as well to OSHA. And then OSHA will decide at that point through the circumstances that you report to them, and they might ask for a little bit more information, whether to investigate that fatality. So in my scenario, we gave them all the information, and they did not investigate it because it was health related. But if they learn of any chemicals or any heat related issues going on, and they think it might be an outside factor due to the work environment or the work that that person was doing, and that's why they had a heart attack, then they'll come out and investigate. But they don't want you to determine whether it was work-related or not. They want to know about all heart attacks. So again, if you learn of a fatality 30 days after the heart attack, you need to report it within 8 hours. Inpatient hospitalizations. So of 1 or more employee. Pre-2015, this was 3 or more employees. So this is now it's just 1 or more employee. If 1 employee is an inpatient at a hospital, they want to know about it. All right. So these need to be reported to OSHA within 24 hours. after you learn about it, and if the inpatient hospitalization occurs within 24 hours of the work-related incident. So someone's injured at work and then they don't go to the hospital for 2 days later and they're admitted into the hospital, you actually wouldn't be required to report that. So within 24 hours of the incident, after you learn about it, then you have the clock starts ticking again and you have 24 hours to report to OSHA. So it's good to know and understand this, because the last thing you want to do is not report and then OSHA finds out about it. Won't be good. Additionally, the last thing you want to do is report something that maybe you didn't have to. So we'll talk about that in a little bit here as well. Again, heart attacks, they call this out specifically, that result in inpatient hospitalization must be reported. Again, OSHA will decide whether they want to investigate further. Okay, so inpatient hospitalization has a very specific meaning to OSHA, and OSHA defines it as a formal admission into the inpatient service of a hospital or clinic for care or treatment. So care or treatment is kind of the big words there, right? You do not need to report inpatient hospitalization for observation or diagnostic testing only. So again, another one I've dealt with where an individual burned his hand and he was admitted inpatient overnight for observation only. They just wanted to make sure that if something went south, he was there and they could jump on it, right? Nothing went south. They didn't do any care or treatment. At that point, they released him. He was only admitted for observation only. We did not have to report that to OSHA. My recommendation is that you obtain a letter from the doctor that states that the inpatient hospitalization was for observation or diagnostic testing only, and you have that paperwork on file just to protect yourself in the event that OSHA did find out about this injury and they're pushing the issue that you didn't report it. You would then have that information to provide to OSHA that you were doing your due diligence. So amputations, again, that happen within 24 hours of the incident need to be reported once you learn about them within 24 hours, okay? And they have some clear-cut examples of what amputations are. So loss of a limb or appendage, obviously, is the classic example. But the big thing here is even fingertip amputations with or without bone loss. So some people say to me, well, it's just the tip of his finger, just a little bit of the, little meat of the skin on the tip of the finger, maybe with a little bit of a fingernail came off. But no bone, it's not a big deal. No, OSHA thinks that's a big deal. They want to know about it. And they are big on these amputations. So in my experience to date, any OSHA reported amputation, OSHA will come out and they will send an inspector to do an investigation of what happened. So they are hot on amputations. Where there are some other scenarios I've been involved in where the employer had to report an inpatient hospitalization, and OSHA is so swamped with actually doing amputation inspections and other inspections, but a lot of them are amputation inspections, that they actually just they didn't dispatch an inspector to go on site and inspect it. They did a post-accident rapid response investigation where they pretty much send you an accident report form that you need to fill out with a lot of details, corrective action. You need to follow up with OSHA maybe a couple times to show them your corrective action is in place. And if they're satisfied with your response, they won't send an inspector out. So it's not actually an inspection, it still gets a case number. If they're not satisfied with your response, they will definitely send an inspector out and open an inspection. But amputations, from my experience, they're not going to do a post-accident rapid response investigation. They're sending someone out there. All right. So they're very hot on amputations. They want to know about them. So make sure that if these are happening, hopefully they're not. They need to be reported. All right. Amputations do not include, and then they give us some crazy examples like deglovings and scalpings, right? They're saying that's not an amputation. However, if that kind of stuff is going on, you got to believe it's going to be an inpatient hospitalization, and you're reporting because of that, okay? Also, broken or chipped teeth, they're not considering that amputation. Severed parts of the ears, they're not considering an amputation. Again, remember, we have that inpatient hospitalization though. And then the last one here, loss of an eye. Again, 24 hours after the injury, if the individual loses their eye, you need to report that to OSHA within 24 hours of learning about it. And they're pretty specific here. Loss of an eye is actual physical removal of the eye. If someone loses their sight, but there's not physical removal of the eye, that's not what they're talking about. However, if there's an injury to the eye where someone's losing their sight, again, might be admitted into the hospital for that. So something to be keeping your eye on. So how do we report these injuries? There's a couple ways. There's actually 3 ways, and we'll go through all 3 of them. So the first one, you can report it by telephone or actually in person at the area office. So you can call your area office if you know the number, or you can drive to the area office and go tell them about it in their office, right? I don't recommend that way of doing it. And also, if the office is closed, you can't say, well, they were closed, that's why I didn't get to you within 24 hours. That's not going to fly, right? Because they have a 1-800 number, toll free. That would be a better option, this 1-800 number, calling it in. However, I don't recommend that either, because now you're talking to someone and maybe you're going to get into conversation and they're going to be asking questions that maybe you don't have to answer right then and there, and maybe you're going to be giving too much information up front, which, I'm always a fan of give the information you're required to give and no more, and then if that sparks an investigation, then you can answer more questions. Electronic submittal on their website is how I recommend that these are reported to OSHA. All right. There's a form you would fill out. You're going to fill out the exact information they're asking for. You're not given any more information than what they're asking for. And then they'll be following up by phone with you or potentially knocking on your door. So also recommendations, contact your safety professional or legal department or attorney just to ensure that the injury you're about to report absolutely has to be reported and that you're going about it the right way. Obviously, if it's a fatality, you got to report that, but you want to be talking to your attorney before you report that to OSHA to make sure that you're getting everything under control, you understand what happened, and you're ready for that. It's not a fun experience. Hopefully no one has to go through that. I recommend reporting through the website. So how would you go about doing that? OSHA.gov, actually right there on the front page, they have a couple, headlines that kind of cycle through. This one's still on here, right up there. If they take that away as one of the headlines, right there under the take action, the third one is reported death or severe injury. And then you would get brought to this form. You start filling the form in. Again, make sure that you have the right information. Contact your safety professional. Contact your attorney. All right, it's going to ask you all this fun stuff here. We don't need to go through that today. Motor vehicle accidents. So if a severe injury happens inside of a construction work zone, then that's construction site, construction work zone. You need to report that, okay? If it occurs, however, outside a construction work zone, that's regulated under DOT. So OSHA is not going to require you to report that. Let's say, an employee is on the clock driving and is involved in an automobile accident. Now they're inpatient hospitalization, right? Still maybe work related. It needs to go on your OSHA logs. However, if it was outside of a work zone, That's more DOT, state police type stuff. It's probably already been reported with the police. OSHA doesn't need to know about it. So same thing with, public transportation. Okay. So employee involvement. So let's talk about this a little bit, because there's been some things that were updated here and actually went into effect December 1st. All right. So employee involvement found under 1904.35. If you want to go get more information on that, that's what the standard number. But you still need to inform each employee of how he or she is to report a work-related injury or illness. So that never changed. That was always law. You're required to do that. You have to tell your employees how to report injuries and illnesses. Okay? And upon request, provide access to injury records. Yeah, if an employee asks for injury records like the OSHA logs, they have the right to those, and you need to provide them. There's certain provisions there, but that doesn't change. That's still in place. All right? So the old standard said you need to set up a way for employees to report promptly and tell them how to do that. All right. So the new requirements are updating that language to be more specific and more stern on making sure we're doing that. All right. So it says you must establish a reasonable procedure for employees to report work-related injuries and illnesses promptly and accurately. So they're being very specific that they want prompt and accurate reporting of injuries. All right. A procedure would not be reasonable if it would deter or discourage an employee from reporting. All right. And we're going to dig into this a little bit. Here's a couple examples of violations. All right. So if an employee must travel a significant distance to report an injury, that's going to probably deter them, right? It's not that big of an injury. I'm not going all the way over there. I don't want to report this, right? Or if an employee must report the injury to multiple people over and over, multiple levels of management, this is the pain. I'm not going to go now tell this person and then this person and this person. I'm just not going to report this, right? So it needs to be reasonable, and it needs to make sure that they're promptly and accurately reporting these injuries. So they're clarifying this because, again, we have that electronic submittal of OSHA records, and so they want to make sure that they're getting the right records. So they don't want us to put a weird provision in place that's going to deter an employee from saying, hey, I was actually injured here. All right. You must also inform the employee of your procedure. So this is our procedure to promptly and accurately report injuries, right? And you must inform them that they have the right to report these injuries. All right. So it is their right to report injuries to their employer, right? Not only do they have to promptly and accurately do it, but it's their right to report injuries. And you also need to tell your employees that you are prohibited from discharging them or discriminating against them for reporting any injuries. So you have to tell them that, right? I'm required by law to tell you that this is how we report injuries promptly and accurately. It's your right to report injuries, and I cannot discriminate you or take any kind of negative action towards you for reporting your injury. Period. We have to tell our employees that. So there is a new OSHA poster that says all of that, and you can get it in multiple languages on the link that you see on your screen. That's on OSHA's website. But OSHA is going to be pretty strict about this, right? If OSHA did an inspection of your company and they asked an employee, do you know how to report an injury? And they said, I have no idea what you're talking about, you're going to have a little bit of an issue, all right? And they strengthen their position on this through their anti-retaliation protections, which we're going to talk about now, that they actually have new laws and new standards in place to protect employees from any retaliation that an employer may take on an employee for reporting an injury. All right. Again, why are they doing this? Well, you're telling me as an employer now that I have to submit my OSHA logs, and you're going to make that publicly available. Well, maybe I'm going to try and figure out a way to now make sure my employees don't report these to me, so I don't have them on my log to put them on the website. That's what OSHA is trying to protect against. So anti-retaliation protections, these are new. So let's take a look at them. Again, the specific standard under 1904-35 employee involvement, you see the standard there, B1 Roman numeral 4. All right, it says that you must not discourage or in any manner discriminate against any employee for reporting a work-related injury or illness. So that's written there in an OSHA standard as law. Okay, so if OSHA finds that you're violating that in any form that we're about to talk about, you could receive a citation. Again, statute of limitations, 6 months. But we're going to dig into how they could maybe cite you for that standard if you have some policies in play that they're not going to like. All right. So inside the preamble to this final rule, they talk about, if you terminate an employee because they reported an injury, if you reduce their pay or withhold their bonuses because they reported an injury, meaning, oh, you were injured this month, well, you're not getting your bonus. That's definitely going to deter me from reporting my injury to you next time, because I know you withhold my bonuses, so I'm not reporting my injuries anymore. That's what OSHA does not want to see happen. Reassignment to a less desirable position, right? So demoting someone, embarrassing an employee, making them, wear a goofy pink hard hat for a week because they had an injury, and maybe you're saying, hey, it's all in good fun. We just want everybody to know that this injury happened so it doesn't happen again. Well, that person was embarrassed and everyone knows what's going to happen, so nobody reports an injury. I've never seen that happen before, but that's OSHA's example. So must have happened somewhere. And then they specify in the preamble or any other adverse action that would deter a reasonable employee from reporting a work-related injury. So that's very open-ended, all right? So you may be asking yourself, well, this sounds very similar to the Whistleblower Law, which you're right. So Section 11C of the OSHA Act, commonly referred to as a whistleblower law, already has these protections in place, right? So this protects employees from retaliation against bringing up a safety issue, filing a complaint with OSHA, reporting a work-related injury or illness, participating in an OSHA inspection, right? So if you had an employee that complained to OSHA, you learned about it and took negative action towards them, you would be violating the whistleblower law. Or if they participated in an OSHA inspection and you didn't like that, you thought that maybe they should have kept their mouth shut and shouldn't have answered questions, and you took negative action towards them, whistleblower law, you're violating that, right? So if this is already in place, and it has been in place for multiple years, and OSHA definitely enforces it, you'll see a headline every now and then, such and such company fined, $350,000 in order to reinstate employee and back pay him $630,000, something crazy. So this happens, right? So if this is already in place, then why do they have this new standard that really calls this out again, right? And so the standard, again, specifically protects against reporting work-related injuries and illnesses. And again, OSHA felt that the new electronic reporting could lead to discrimination. And also under 11C, an employee must file a complaint with OSHA within 30 days of that retaliation. And if they don't, then, they can't do anything with it. Now there's a standard there, so that there's evidence of not abiding by or breaking this law, the standard, within the last 6 months. If the evidence is there, now they can cite you. So that's why they have this in here. All right. So again, in the preamble, they talk about any other adverse action. They call out 3 specific examples of adverse action. They call out disciplinary policies, they call out employee incentive programs, and they call out post-accident drug and alcohol testing policies. So we're going to go through all 3 of these, because you guys need to make sure that your programs and policies that are currently in place, if they're violating this and you have an OSHA inspection and they say, please send me your disciplinary policy, and it has evidence of retaliation in it, you're going to get a citation. Or if they're looking at your incentive program and you think it's a great incentive program, but it has a way for employees to hold back reporting injuries because of the incentive program, you could potentially get a citation because of that. And this is currently in play. So this went into effect December of last year. So currently, if your policies and programs are in violation of this, you're currently violating the standard, and you have exposure to citations if you ever have a OSHA inspection. So you just need to pay attention, make sure your policies and programs are up to date. So let's look at disciplinary policies, right? So it's not saying that you can't have a disciplinary program, because that's totally the opposite. OSHA expects you to have a disciplinary program, and they expect you to enforce your rules, and they expect you to write people up that aren't doing the right thing and enforce your disciplinary program. But what they don't want you to do is use your disciplinary program as a threat to not report injuries. So how could this happen? Well, anytime we use our disciplinary program and write someone up is only when someone gets injured. That's going to be an issue, right? So Bob falls off a ladder and breaks his leg, and I find that he wasn't using the ladder properly, so I write him up, or I give him a 3-day suspension. Well, people are going to hear about that, and they're going to say, wow, Bob got hurt and then he got written up, right? So if I get hurt, I'm not gonna report it, right? So if that is the case, and OSHA finds out, what are they going to ask you for? Show me all your write-ups of employees that haven't used the ladder properly. And if you don't have any, that's going to be amazing, because we all know people don't use ladders properly. Or show me any other write-up for Bob. I don't have any. So Bob's been perfect up to this point, and he didn't use the ladder right. Or show me any other write-up at all from the last year. Well, I don't have any. You're going to have an issue. All right. So now if you have, this is the 3rd write-up for Bob, and we have 20 other write-ups for ladder misuse within the last 3 months, maybe you got an argument, you got a leg to stand on. I know some companies are saying if we learn of a safety violation because of an injury, we're not using our disciplinary policy, right? Because we're using it the wrong way. Not saying you have to do that, but let's use our disciplinary policies when it matters, before somebody gets hurt, right? Nobody's hurt yet, but everyone's using the ladder the wrong way. Or are we just going to walk by blindly, or are we going to start saying, hey, you got to use that the right way per your training? The toolbox talk we just did last week, right? Walk by them tomorrow, they're still not doing it the right way. You got to write them up, right? It's going to make them think they won't use it the wrong way. They won't fall, break their leg. That's what OSHA expects. They don't expect you to only write people up after an injury. So you need to be looking at this. So here's some examples. Again, these will be on the slides. Just request them through the safety helpline, and I'll send you these slides, okay? So employee incentive programs. Again, OSHA is not saying to not incentivize your employees for doing the right thing. But what they don't want you to do is say, hey, if you don't have any injuries for the whole year, at our Christmas party, we'll put your name in a hat and we'll pull 3 names and you walk away with a big screen TV. Well, I want that TV, so I'm not going to report my injuries, right? Or at the end of the month, every month, if we have 0 injuries, we're going to have a pizza party. Well, I just cut my hand and I could report it and ruin the pizza party for everyone this month, or I could just wrap it up in tape and hide it, right? I'm probably going to wrap it up in tape and hide it. And then it gets infected and I have other issues, so that's not good. We got to report injuries. Okay, so they don't want incentive programs where we're saying, hey, if you don't get hurt, we'll incentivize you. It needs to be the opposite of that, right? If you see something that could hurt somebody or you witness a near miss, report it and we'll incentivize you. If you complete your training, your weekly toolbox talk for the whole year, we're going to put your name in a hat. We're going to draw names at the end of the year, and then you win that TV because you participated in all the training and you're doing what we asked for you. So we call those leading indicators, right? We don't want to incentivize on lagging indicators, our injuries. We want to incentivize on the things that are going to lead us to not have injuries. Again, other examples. Post drug and alcohol policies. So this is the third one that they call out. So again, they're not prohibiting you from having a drug and alcohol policy, but what they're saying is an automatic, I don't care what happened, if you get hurt, you're going to take a drug test. Automatic post-accident drug test, they're frowning upon because now I'm in a situation where I cut my hand again and I know I'm going to go for a drug test, so I'm not going to report it, right? So they don't want to discriminate against any reporting. So what are they looking for here, all right? So drug testing due to reasonable cause or reasonable suspicion. So an example, I had someone call me and say, well, so-and-so slipped in the mud, right? Can we reasonably suspect that they were using drugs or alcohol? And honestly, I can't answer that. But if you're just asking just slipping in the mud, no, anybody could slip in the mud, whether they're intoxicated or they're not intoxicated. So just the act of slipping in the mud does not mean that there's reasonable suspicion. Now, I'm not there to talk to the employee, but did the supervisor have a conversation with that employee afterwards and they smelt alcohol on their breath, or they smelt marijuana on them, or their eyes were bloodshot, or something was, they were acting different than they usually act? Maybe now there's reasonable suspicion, right? And the only way to really have that is to make sure your supervisors are trained to know the cues and to document a reasonable suspicion, right? A lot of times it's like, yeah, so-and-so dropped a hammer on my head and hurt me, and I'm going to take the drug test. What about the guy that dropped the hammer? Can I reasonably suspect that they dropped the hammer because they were taking drugs? I don't know. Or so-and-so backed up and hit me with the forklift, and I'm going to take the drug test? What about the guy driving the forklift when I was yelling at him and he wasn't paying attention? All right? So we need to take a look at our drug and alcohol policies to make sure that it's not just a pull the trigger, automatic, you were hurt, go take a drug test. You stepped on a nail, go take a drug test, right? Because OSHA is going to frown upon that, all right? So there's a lot of people that think that's bad news, and you know, all I have to say, it is what it is. I just want to make sure that you guys are informed of the rule, so that you're not putting yourself in a position where you could get a citation. And maybe it'll just make you get your drug and alcohol program a little bit tighter, because if you've only been waiting for an injury to drug test someone and you think that's an issue in your company, maybe you need to train your supervisors to have a reasonable suspicion that, you know, if you think you got a problem going on, you're addressing it before someone is injured. So again, you'll have all these slides. Just request it from me. Okay, so that's going to conclude our webinar today. We're right at 2, so we're right at the hour mark. Again, if this sparked any questions for you, please contact the FCA Safety Helpline. If you want a copy of the slide handouts, send an email to safetyhelpline@finishingcontractors.org, and we'll respond back with the slide presentation. If you're interested in toolbox talks, FCA offers, toolbox talks as well. And we also broadcast a monthly safety bulletin, and we also have a monthly safety call where, everyone on the line participates. So if you're interested in that, again, please reach out to us and we'll get you those invites. So thank you for your time today, and have a great and safe day.